It's quiet now in my Chicago apartment, the kind of quiet that took years to earn. The city hums outside, a familiar, comforting murmur against the glass, not the suffocating silence of a broken heart. I sit here sometimes, a mug of cold coffee in my hand, staring out at the skyline I helped shape, and I think about how close I came to losing everything, to losing myself. It feels like a lifetime ago, a different man living a different story, but the echoes, they still linger. My life before Chloe was orderly, meticulously constructed, like one of my architectural designs. I was Elias Thorne, 36, an architect with a reputation for precision and a life built on a foundation of responsibility. Most of that responsibility centered around my younger brother, Julian. Julian, who was 5 years my junior, had always been the wild card, the artistic soul, the one who chased feeling rather than structure. And for too many years, that chase led him down dark alleys, into the grip of addiction. I pulled him out, time and again, scraping him off floors, navigating rehabs, pouring every ounce of my will and resources into his recovery. It was a long, brutal fight, one that left me with a permanent ache in my chest and a deep-seated protectiveness. When he finally found sobriety, and with it, a burgeoning talent for painting, I felt a kind of exhausted triumph. I'd saved him, or so I thought. I believed our bond was unbreakable, forged in fire and loyalty. He was my purpose, my anchor, and perhaps my excuse not to truly live for myself. Then Chloe walked into my life, a vibrant splash of color in my carefully monochromatic world. I met her at an opening, one of Julian's small group shows, where he was exhibiting a few pieces. She owned the Azure Gallery, one of those chic, minimalist spaces in River North. She had a laugh that chimed like crystal, eyes that seemed to hold untold stories, and a way of making me feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long time. She complimented my work, surprisingly aware of my firm's projects, and spoke with such passion about art, about life, about breaking free from convention. I was captivated. The man who designed soaring glass towers and meticulously planned urban landscapes, found myself drawn to her chaotic, vibrant energy. She called my life beautifully austere, a compliment that felt like a gentle tease. She was everything I wasn't, spontaneous, uninhibited, effortlessly glamorous. My disciplined routine, my quiet evenings, suddenly felt less like peace and more like loneliness. She became the light I hadn't realized I was missing, illuminating corners of my soul I'd kept hidden away. I felt a hope blossom within me, fragile and exhilarating. I thought, finally, I could have something just for me. A partner, a muse, someone to share the quiet triumphs and the loud joys. Our relationship took off quickly, a whirlwind of gallery openings, late-night dinners, and whispered conversations in her art-filled loft. She charmed everyone, especially Julian, who seemed to instantly connect with her artistic sensibility. She'd lean in close, her hand resting lightly on my arm, her gaze intense, and talk about our future, a future I had allowed myself to dream of for the first time in years. But even in those early, intoxicating days, there were whispers of dissonance, faint off notes in the beautiful symphony she was composing. I remember one evening, we were at a small, intimate dinner party at her gallery, and I was discussing a complex zoning issue for a new project. She'd smiled, a perfect, dazzling smile, and interjected, "Oh, Elias, always so grounded in reality. Sometimes I think you're more comfortable with concrete than with passion." It was delivered playfully, but it stung a little. A subtle jab, easily dismissed as her artistic temperament, her free spirit clashing with my pragmatic nature. Another time, she'd insisted on reorganizing some of Julian's canvases in our shared studio, a space I had set up for him, paid for, and meticulously maintained to provide him a safe, stable creative environment. She moved things around, declared his initial arrangement too cramped, too restrictive, and when I gently suggested he might prefer his own system, she'd just laughed, a little too brightly. "Oh, Elias, you always want to control everything, don't you? Artists need to breathe." I brushed it off, telling myself I was being overly sensitive, overly protective of Julian. She was just being helpful, right? She was connecting with Julian, understanding him in a way I, the practical older brother, couldn't. The seeds of doubt, once planted, began to sprout. Chloe started spending more and more time with Julian, ostensibly to help him develop his brand and find his voice. She spoke of his untapped potential, his raw genius, in a way that made Julian preen, his chest puffing out with an unfamiliar confidence. He started calling my advice stifling, my concern overbearing. Chloe says I need to break free from your shadow, Elias, he'd say. His eyes hardened with an edge I hadn't seen since his addiction was at its worst. He'd start skipping our Sunday brunches, which had been a sacred ritual of rebuilding our bond, for brainstorming sessions with Chloe. When I'd ask about it, she'd give me a look that was both empathetic and slightly condescending, as if I just didn't understand the artistic process. He needs space, darling, to grow. You've held his hand for so long. He's forgotten how to walk on his own. Each comment, each subtle shift, chipped away at my foundation. I felt like I was watching a slow-motion car crash, powerless to stop it. I tried to talk to Chloe, to voice my concerns about Julian's sudden change in attitude, about the way he was pushing me away. She'd stroke my arm, look at me with those deep, knowing eyes, and tell me I was imagining things. You're projecting your own fears onto him, Elias. You're afraid he'll relapse, aren't you? But he's strong now. He's thriving. She'd make me feel like I was the insecure one, the overprotective one, the one who was holding Julian back. My carefully constructed reality began to warp. I started questioning my own memories, my own intentions. Had I been too controlling? Was my love for Julian truly just a gilded cage? The unease settled deep in my gut, a constant, churning anxiety. I'd lie awake at night, my mind replaying conversations, trying to find the point where I'd gone wrong, where I'd missed the mark. The shift was undeniable, palpable. Chloe became Julian's primary confidant, his muse, his entire world. I remember walking into the studio one evening, unannounced, expecting to find Julian working. Instead, I found Chloe, her back to me, her hand resting on Julian's arm, her head tilted intimately towards his. He was laughing, a free, unburdened sound, and then she turned, a quick, almost imperceptible flick of her wrist pulling her hand away. Her smile was immediate, practiced, but for a fraction of a second, I saw something else in her eyes, a flash of proprietorship, a predatory gleam. My blood ran cold. Elias, darling, just admiring Julian's progress, she'd said, her voice a little too bright. Julian had looked away, a faint flush on his cheeks. I had wanted to rage, to demand an explanation, but the words caught in my throat. I just nodded, a hollow sound escaping my lips, and left. The next day, Julian confronted me. He said I was stifling his creativity, that I didn't understand his vision. He said Chloe understood him in a way I never could. She sees the real me, Elias, the artist, not the screw-up you keep trying to fix. His words were Chloe's words, twisted and spat back at me. He accused me of being jealous, of wanting to keep him tethered to my structured, boring life. He said he was moving out of our shared studio, that Chloe had found him a new, more inspiring space closer to her gallery. Each word was a knife, carving away at my heart, at the brotherly bond one had sacrificed so much for. My vision blurred. I felt dizzy, disoriented, like the entire world had shifted on its axis. The culmination of it all was Julian's first solo exhibition. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had financed the vast majority of it, poured my own savings into making his dream a reality, believing it was the next step in his healing, his career. I designed the invitations, coordinated with the caterers, even handled the lighting in Chloe's gallery, which she graciously offered as the venue. I walked into the crowded space on opening night, a nervous tremor in my stomach, but also a surge of paternal pride. Julian was there, looking polished, confident, surrounded by admirers. Chloe was by his side, resplendent in a shimmering silk dress, her arm linked through his. She caught my eye and offered a thin, triumphant smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The moment came when Chloe took to the small podium. The room quieted. She began to speak, her voice a warm, cultured murmur, praising Julian's raw talent, his fearless spirit, his journey. And then, the pivot. Julian's art, she began, her gaze sweeping the room, lingering on me for a fraction of a second, represents true liberation. It's a defiant shout against the forces that would seek to constrain, to control, to dictate an artist's vision for their own narrow benefit. A subtle implication, but the sting was unmistakable. My stomach clenched. He needed a voice, a partner, a true muse who understood that genius cannot be caged. He needed someone to champion his freedom, to see past the burdens of the past and into the boundless future. She tightened her grip on Julian's arm, pulling him closer. And that, my dear friends, is the essence of our creative partnership, a bond that transcends mere familial ties or mundane expectations. It is a fusion of souls, a shared journey into the deepest realms of artistic expression. The applause was deafening. Julian beamed, turning to Chloe with an adoration that twisted my insides. I felt a cold dread wash over me, a physical sickness that made my knees weak. I walked towards Julian, my vision narrowing to just him, pushing through the celebrating crowd. My voice was a raw whisper. Julian, what is she doing? What is this? He turned to me, his face alight with a fervor I didn't recognize, a manufactured anger in his eyes. He wasn't seeing me, not truly. He was seeing the image Chloe had painted of me. She's telling the truth, Elias. You never believed in me. You always tried to keep me small, to control my life, my art. You just wanted me to be your little project, your clean conscience. The words hung in the air, echoing Chloe's veiled accusations. The public humiliation was a physical blow, worse than any punch. My chest seized. I felt my vision tunnel, the colorful art blurring into a dizzying vortex. He disavowed me, right there, in front of everyone, echoing her poisoned narrative. The brother I had sacrificed everything for, the brother I had literally saved from death's door, had turned on me. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat, and found myself face to face with Chloe. Her smile was gone, replaced by an expression of cold, calculating satisfaction. You did this. I choked out, my voice barely audible above the celebratory din. Her eyes glittered, devoid of warmth or remorse. She leaned in close, her breath warm against my ear, and whispered, her voice like ice. He needs a muse, Elias, not a warden. And I'm a much more interesting one. In that moment, the world snapped into focus. The mask was gone. The charm, the light, the passion, it was all a performance, a carefully constructed illusion. She was a predator, always had been, drawn to vulnerability, to those who could be molded and controlled. She had seen Julian's talent, his insecurity, and my unwavering support, and she had systematically dismantled everything, not just for his career, but to prove a point, to exert power, to hurt me. My mind reeled. The betrayal was absolute, a gaping wound in the center of my being. I don't remember leaving the gallery, not clearly. The next few days were a blur of numb existence. I retreated into my apartment, the city outside becoming a distant, meaningless drone. I didn't eat, didn't sleep, just sat in the dark, replaying every interaction, every conversation, every subtle manipulation. The weight of betrayal was crushing, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I felt hollowed out, gutted, my soul scraped clean of hope. The twin losses, Julian, my anchor, and Chloe, my imagined light, left me adrift in a sea of despair. I questioned everything, my judgment, my intentions, my very identity. Was I truly the controlling, suffocating brother she had painted me to be? Had my love been a burden all along? Days bled into weeks. The grief was immense, but slowly, painfully, something else began to stir within me. A flicker of anger, cold and clear. I started seeing the patterns, the calculated precision of her actions, so unlike the spontaneous artistry she projected. Her words, her timing, her complete lack of empathy. It was all too perfect, too deliberate. She wasn't an artist. She was an architect of emotional destruction. And Julian, in his vulnerability and desire for validation, had walked right into her carefully laid trap. He was a victim, yes, but he was also complicit, choosing the path of least resistance, the intoxicating flattery over genuine, if sometimes challenging, love. The realization was a bitter pill, but also a lifeline. I wasn't the monster. I wasn't the problem. She was. And I couldn't save Julian from himself if he didn't want to be saved. My only power lay in saving myself. The first step was agonizingly clear. I had to sever the ties. The shared studio, the space I had painstakingly created for Julian, had become a monument to my heartbreak. I walked in there one last time, the smell of turpentine and canvas a ghost of happier days. I packed up my few architectural models, my drafting tools, and made the call to a real estate agent. Selling it was a symbolic act, a painful amputation, but it was necessary. It was my first concrete step towards reclaiming my space, my life, my future, free from the shadow of Chloe's manipulation and Julian's fragile reliance. It was a commitment to myself. Months passed, then a year. The pain didn't vanish, not entirely, but it transmuted, shifting from a raw, open wound to a deep scar. I channeled all that raw energy, all that heartache and fury, into my work. But this time, it wasn't just about constructing buildings. It was about building something meaningful, something that countered the very essence of Chloe's destructive nature. The idea for the community art center blossomed from my pain, a phoenix rising from the ashes of my shattered trust. It would be a space where artists, especially young, vulnerable ones, could find genuine support, mentorship, and a safe environment to create, free from exploitation and manipulation. A place where their talent would be nurtured, not weaponized. Designing the center became my therapy, my redemption. Every line drawn, every material chosen, was an act of healing. I envisioned sunlit studios, communal workshops, a gallery space where art was celebrated for its own sake, not as a tool for personal gain. It was hard, grueling work, but each day brought a renewed sense of purpose. I spoke with artists, with community leaders, with therapists, understanding what true support looked like, what genuine empowerment felt like. I learned that my desire to help Julian, while deeply flawed in its execution, came from a place of love. I just hadn't understood that I couldn't control his choices, only provide him with the tools and the safety net. Now, I could create that safety net for others, without the expectation of controlling their journey. Julian. I still hear about him sometimes. His art career, fueled by Chloe's relentless networking and his own fragile talent, has had its moments. I saw a picture of him once in a magazine, looking gaunt, his eyes a little too bright, standing next to Chloe at another gallery opening. She looked as glamorous and predatory as ever. There's a bittersweet ache when I think of him. I still love my brother, deeply, but it's a love held at a distance, protected. He made his choices. I hope, truly, that one day he finds his way out of her shadow, that he realizes the true cost of the path he chose. But I can't be the one to rescue him again. My path now is about rebuilding, about creating a legacy of genuine support, not manipulation. I sit here now, looking at the city lights. My life isn't quiet because it's empty. It's quiet because it's no longer filled with the chaotic noise of someone else's agenda. I've found a new kind of peace, a resilience forged in fire. I lost a brother, I lost a love, but in the process, I found myself. I'm stronger, wiser, more empathetic, yet also more discerning. The Community Arts Center stands now, a beacon of hope, and I see the genuine joy and creativity it fosters. I couldn't control Julian's choices, but I could control my own path to resilience. And that, I realize, is the most profound liberation of all. The pain is a part of my story, a scar that reminds me of what I survived, what I learned. But it no longer defines me. I am Elias Thorne, and I am finally whole.